All right, looks like we are live. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. As always, I am your host, Alex Pedikov. I hope everyone is doing great tonight. Really excited for the show tonight. We're going to be bringing it back to New Hampshire, my home state. Always love talking the New Hampshire Bigfoot stuff, so it's going to be a lot of fun. If you guys haven't seen last week's episode, we did a recap of our recent trip to the Pacific Northwest. I'm in a brain fog right now. Excuse me. We did a recap of our Oregon trip. We did a California one as well. Those films are coming out soon, actually in August. It is August. In the end of August, the first episode from that trip, rather, Beyond the Trail, will be coming out on the Small Town Monsters channel. I'm in the thick of editing that at the moment, so that's fun. So stay tuned for that. But if you haven't seen other episodes, we've got a long archive. This is show 67, so there's a lot of different content, a lot of different episodes. I was rewatching some recently, actually, and kind of skimming through, and it's crazy imagining it's a year and something later they've been doing the show. So thanks to everybody who tunes in, as always. But without further ado, let's start talking about what we're going to be talking about tonight. So as I mentioned, bringing the topic back to New Hampshire, we're actually going to be talking to a researcher named Evan, who is going to remain anonymous, but will be using his voice. Pretty cool. I've been talking to him a little bit. Basically, what he wrote, the goal of his page. He has a page on Instagram called New Hampshire Sasquatch, and this is the goal. I'll read directly from what was written. New Hampshire Sasquatch is dedicated to the documentation of encounters and potential evidence that comes from the Granite State as well as surrounding areas. N.H.S. is not associated with larger research groups and focuses on each individual witness and their encounter, making it a judgment-free outlet to the Bigfoot community. N.H.S. has found success within the community with drawing forward witnesses from within the Northeast with the main goal of making the region more accepting and open to the topic of Sasquatch. I mean, that's such a great, I echo that sentiment, absolutely. So without further ado, let's talk to Evan, aka New Hampshire Sasquatch. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's everybody doing tonight?
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. I noticed your page a while ago on Instagram, and our mutual friend Brian, who has been on the show as well, was talking about you had some pretty cool things on your page. So I went and checked it out, and I like what you're up to.
I really appreciate it. It's a long time coming. I wish I did it sooner. I can only imagine where I've could have been today if I started maybe 2-3 years ago.
Sure. I mean, it's that's kind of I think a lot of people get that feeling, especially if they've had things happen. It's you wonder, why isn't there more information out there? Why isn't there more, especially in an area like New Hampshire, like New England, where there just isn't. I mean, there's some articles, there's some BFRO reports or reports on other sites, but it's so far and few between. Yet the stories are there. I mean, I know that there's a lot of encounters. I certainly have a lot of encounters. I've been told over the years that it's a sort of for your ears only kind of thing.
Oh
So
yeah, I'm completely backed up with encounters all the way back until March of this year.
awesome. We're
Yeah.
going to get all into talking about some of that. But I just want to say hey to everyone in the comments. There's a lot of great folks. We got Kevin Hamilton. What's going on? I hope your trip up to the Nordegg habituation area up there in Alberta was awesome. Would be very curious to hear about that. Lots of great people. Diana, how's it going? We got Brian in the comments. Brian and Chewy, what's going on, man? Johnny, Peggy says hi, Squatchy peeps. What's going on? And Brian said, "What's up, buddy? This is going to be a great N.H.S. in the house. Awesome, yeah." We have Mothman46 says, "Nice shirt." Yeah, I had to put on the New Hampshire Wood Devils shirt, of course. Got New Hampshire there at the bottom. Awesome, awesome T-shirt. One of my favorites, actually. Greg Morrill, sup, New Hampshire, and hello to everybody else in the comments as well. A lot of awesome people. So, yeah, without further ado, let's just start talking about what got you into this. I mean, was it an encounter or an interest, or how did you start looking into some of the Sasquatch related stuff?
Well, I've always been interested in the topic of cryptids in general. Just the fact of the unknown and what could be out there has always fascinated me. Especially when there's a lot of people that grow up nowadays with such a stale mindset, thinking that there's nothing out there. So I've always been fascinated with like Monster Quest and In Search of, and you have all those great TV shows and some of the bad ones as well. What kicked it off as well, when I was younger, I went up to Lauren Coleman's Cryptozoology Museum up in Portland. He gave me a few words of wisdom, and I've been off ever since on a quote unquote quest for the truth.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can't think of. I can think of a lot of people who've been inspired by Lauren Coleman. Just a lot of folks that were in the field that kind of stuck their necks out, I suppose, that put their names out there in years past, writing lots of books on the topic. So that's what I love about the regional museum stuff. So you have like Lauren's Museum in Maine, or even Cliff's Museum out in Oregon, even the Monster Mount down in Fouke, Arkansas. You have a lot of just these local places that people can go to, and you might learn about some local encounters. So pretty cool to hear that you were inspired by some of Lauren's words. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy as well. Completely recommend anybody go up there and check it out.
Oh yeah, if you even have a passing interest in the subject, it's well worth a visit. And their current state, I was just there last month when we were filming, or 2 months ago when we were filming our main Beyond the Trail episode, and we got to talk to Lauren and some of the staff there, and people like Nate Brislin, who's a main researcher. The museum has been updated in a way that I think it's awesome now. They have this whole floor space to themselves. It's really kind of come into its own. So definitely recommend that visit, and supporting our friends over there at the Cryptozoology Museum. But so New Hampshire, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of reports. You're inundated with reports. They're there. I mean, people are out in the woods. It's a very small state, 1.3 million population, second most forested after Maine. I always like to hit on that point because I think it's pretty relevant in general to just these kinds of conversations. The amount of habitat. I know you've seen it. I've certainly seen it even in the more populated parts of the state. You drive out 15 minutes and you're in some pretty thick woods, and there's a ton of state parks and forests, and the White Mountain National Forest, of course, is massive. Coos County, very sparsely populated. The habitat's here. I don't think that's really the question. I mean, these environments support up to 1,200-pound animals known as moose. There's a lot of them in New Hampshire. Not as many as Maine, but we still get a lot in New Hampshire. We just have a lot of habitat. So I don't think it's really a question whether or not this area could sustain something like a Sasquatch, at least in my view.
My only conflicting view to that is our winter times are pretty harsh,
Yep.
and considering how large a Sasquatch is, I know there's some people that believe that Sasquatch stay in the same area year round,
Right.
but I am one of those people that believe that they do use the AT, for example, or other mountainous forested routes to navigate the coast or to more hospitable areas.
Sure. No, that's totally valid. I think if you look at a lot of the sightings that happen along the AT, for example, yesterday I was in Whitehall, New York. We wanted to do a live stream, but the service is like really bad in town there. But we were Paul Bartholomew, and a lot of the theories about Whitehall, you have these seasonal reports right with the border of Vermont, where during the summer months, the areas around Whitehall and Lake Champlain, a lot of greenery. But in the winter, there's a lot of deciduous trees there. But right over the Vermont border, there's a lot more um, pine trees and areas, groves of trees where you might be able to hide in the winter, stay a little bit warmer. I know moose like to bed down in cedar swamps as well in some cases. So it's interesting, the possibility of maybe having a range, or not necessarily a migration route, as in you're going down to Florida for the winter, but sort of a regional area. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
these are all questions. We really don't know.
And that's why I love the subject. You get to investigate and you get to find out exactly what you want to find out. If you can, that is. You have to get your hands dirty.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, if you don't get out in the woods. I mean, you can do a lot of people that aren't able to, that maybe they live in the city, or they'd like to read the books and everything. Sure, it's possible to have a encyclopedic knowledge of the history and everything, but unless you really want to get out there and learn the woods, you have to get out in the woods. That's a no-brainer.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about maybe something that you said, kind of, you had stuff happen, but you didn't really maybe attribute it to Sasquatch, or how do you want to start out with some of the reports or some of the things that you've had happen to you?
So when I was younger, everybody, they learn with trial and error, so to say. Um, I've had some instances out in White Mountain National Forest, for example, specifically around Hillary Road, which is off of Crawford Notch, as if you're heading to the Cog Railway. I've made a mistake of being that dumb person thinking that a frozen track that has refrozen over and melted and then froze back over, they expand. Learn from my mistakes. Then we have that. That was when I was younger. But I do have a few occurrences that did happen, such when Brian and I were talking about infrasound. You can't mistake infrasound. And what Brian and I actually came upon the agreement for, and he was actually really excited when I brought this up. It's almost like having a cat laying on your chest and deeply purring, and it just shakes through your entire body. I don't know if some people don't know what I'm talking about out there, but it's a very unique sensation when you do feel that, because you hear it, but you don't hear it at the same time, so to speak. But that is only from my experience, and Brian can probably tell you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, that's something that comes up time and time again. I've never experienced, what we might call infrasound or that sensation from something Sasquatch related. Of course, I know that feeling, cat purring in your area. I've even felt it with a mountain lion up in Squam Lakes. They have the science center up there, and they have those mountain lions on display. And I got to go there during the winter a few years ago when in their off season. When I was filming my documentary Lions of the East, and they were feeding the mountain lions, and I've never felt that before. Where I'm standing 3 feet from the metal bars that are, they're feeding these mice to the mountain lion. You could hear the purring, and I could almost feel it from that distance. It was incredible.
The frequencies,
yeah, it was amazing. I mean, obviously, I felt it with house cats, but never from just not physically touching the mountain lion. You're not going to pet a mountain lion, so just feeling that. So it's very interesting when it comes to the Sasquatch topic. How many people, like with what Brian describes in his encounter of having hearing a roar and feeling it in the chest. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard that or read that in literature about encounters in the PNW or elsewhere in the country. It's incredible. So, I mean, something is going on there. Obviously, not everyone is making up that detail. That's a very strange sensation to, I suppose, just kind of make up if you're having an encounter.
It's very potent. It shakes you. As I was telling Brian, I was in the Belknap region at the time, and I took a game trail that I thought was a regular walking trail down one of the mountains over there, and I came down to a dry stream bed, and there's that native bamboo that grows around. It's completely thick and just covered, and you can't see anything really around you. And what happened there was a rock that was thrown in my direction that landed probably about 2 feet away from me. And I turned around and I thought it was my friend that followed me down that trail. Turns out that he took another trail. And I heard this groaning grumble coming from the bamboo, so to speak. And that's when it really hit me. It just hits your body. Not so much adrenaline just yet, but like I had no idea what I was experiencing at the time until I found out through shows like Monster Quest or Finding Bigfoot, for that matter, about infrasound. And as soon as I talked to other people and compared my encounter with that, it's basically confirmed in a way what I experienced. And there's nothing else in the woods that throws a rock besides a person, but there's nobody there. And as I broke through almost like this paralysis that was inflicted, I ran down that trail. My friend was actually right down next to the trail entrance where I met up with him. There's no possible way that he could have beat me there in time if it was him.
Very interesting. Now, how long would you say? And actually, first of all, did you hear anything aside from the rock, or was
So
it
there was that grumbling noise that I
grumbling noise?
like a grumbling, a grouchy grumbling sound. Not like a
Right.
cat. It was too deep to be a cat.
Okay. And then how long would you say that feeling of strangeness, paralysis, as you described it, would you say that it lasted?
10, 15 seconds probably. Felt like a lot longer, but realistically speaking, probably about 10, 15 seconds.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
And after that, did you when you got down to see your friend? I mean, when you got to the end of the trail, did you talk to him? Did you ask him about anything, if that was him or anything, or what was your first
I
kind of
told him,
reaction?
excuse my language, but I told him to fucking run for the car. I was not having it. I came very close to pissing my pants that day. Very
Wow.
close.
So it was something that definitely didn't sound like a pleasant encounter.
Yeah, and mind you, I'm not a small guy. I'm about 6'3" and above 200 pounds, and I ran like a bullet. I was down that. I was down that trail in no time. It just flashed right before my eyes.
So after that encounter, did that get you more interested into looking into the Sasquatch topic, or was it sort of a confirmation that what you had been interested in before was out there, or what was the case?
Since I couldn't explain what it really was with the infrasound, it was more of the rock that got me. I at first I thought it was just fear and panic, but as a lot of people know, there's a difference between panicking, being scared. You're able to move and you're more than likely able to run. This thing had me in like a induced paralysis, so to speak. And it
Wow.
was weird because I can feel my legs shake trying to move, and I was telling myself in my head like, "You gotta move, you gotta move." I broke free of it. I think it was just a territorial display to
Right.
get me out of its area, so to speak. But yeah, it's definitely life changing, and I only second that to my actual sighting back then.
Interesting. So I want to have you talk about that in a moment, but I do just want to read some of the comments because we have some folks that are also relaying their experiences. So Christopher O'Brien says infrasound made my organs vibrate. My eyes were vibrating. It was terrifying. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your encounter, Christopher. If you'd care to share, or feel free to shoot me an email or something. Mothman46 says elephants and crocodilators use infrasound too. Yeah, elephants actually can communicate supposedly a couple of miles away using infrasound. So there's not a lot that I think we know just yet about the complexities of infrasound. Ryan says, I felt vibrations in the chest as well in late September 2009 in the Adirondacks of New York. Blew me away. Had no idea these things exist prior. There's another interesting one.
Sounds a lot like Brian. I mean, yeah, Brian's encounter.
Yeah, yeah. And Brian is relaying some of his experience as well. He says, very similar thing. Um, he says that's great that there are people in the chat who have had the same thing happen. Fascinating. It's interesting. I mean, you guys are all either making it up or there's actually something going on, right? And I mean, one seems more likely to me, but we'll let people make up their own minds. Really intriguing, actually. Thank you guys all. Christopher actually says his was in Vermont, 15 miles from his home. So we have a Adirondacks, a Vermont, and a New Hampshire, and then your New Hampshire experience as well. So that is super interesting. Thank you all for sharing that. So do you want to talk about your visual sighting now?
Oh yeah. So a few years ago, I lost a very close friend of mine. I basically grew up with him, considered him like a brother. It was Thanksgiving of 2018, I believe. Sorry, I'm a little bad with times.
No, no
So
worries.
I was having a rough time. Um, you know, dealing with the loss of basically my best friend, brother, so to speak. I was driving around late that night. I didn't really want to go home. Kind of want to just get my mind off of things. So I really enjoy driving down dirt roads and back roads. It's something that I've grown up doing for years, be
Me
it with
too. I love it.
family members. It's it's a tradition up here.
Oh, definitely is.
Oh yeah. So I was on this part of a road called Stevens Hill Road that is located in Nottingham, New Hampshire, which is just north of Pawtuckaway. And it was a very cold night from what I remember. There was a little bit of snow, not too much, but a little dusting, so to speak. And I was rounding this corner, and my high beams caught a amber reddish kind of reflection. I don't want to call it glowing because when the creature did turn its head at the end, it did not show the eye shine or eye glow as some people describe. So that's where I kind of narrowed it down to eye shine. So I'm pulling up to this thing. I thought it was a tree at first, then with a reflector on it, and I start pulling up to it more, and I slow down, and this thing has its arm, its right arm, kind of shielding its eyes from the high beams I had shining on it. And I'm sitting there like, holy shit, this is actually happening. So we're sitting there, probably can't see me through the high beams, but I'm sitting there staring at it, and it's looking. I kind of caught it in like mid stride from what I think. It had one foot slightly in front of the other. It's slowly lowered its arm, still looking at me, kind of adjusting its eyes to the light, and just kind of moves its shoulders in a way to kind of face me more, not moving its feet, mind you. And it just kind of looks at me probably for about 5-10 seconds or more. I was so excited at the time I couldn't keep track. So as this thing is just staring at me, I'm just thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this is actually happening. This is a moment that I've been waiting for my entire life to actually see one of these things. Mind you, I'm frozen in fear knowing that this thing could, kill me. Because it's a pretty big boy from what I saw, and it was a boy. For those of you that are wondering, you could see its genitalia pretty clearly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So as it's staring at me, I have my music on pretty loud, just listening to one of my favorite songs. And I can see this thing kind of like puff up its cheeks and its lips. And you can see the hot air just leaving its mouth. I'm guessing that it kind of grunted at me and kind of like a, what are you staring at? Like, what are you doing? Get out of here type of thing. Territorial, as I would have to relate it. And the thing just kind of turns and walks off down into the woods. But from what I saw, the hair was pretty dark for the most part, but I did notice that on the longer parts on its forearms, it had slightly longer hair, and I was able to see some of the hair kind of like absorb some of the light into like a reddish hue, so to speak. And it was also encrusted with some frost and some pieces of snow in some parts of its hair. Kind of like it had it tufted up, kind of like if you leave like a jacket or anything that might have like some sort of like fur or artificial fur, it'll clump up together, and that's what it was doing on this creature's body.
That is really interesting. I mean, that's a great detail you mentioned. I've heard that in a couple of the reports up here where they have almost, like you might notice it on a dog too, walking through the snow or in cold weather, you'll get those sort of ice or snow clumps. Yeah. So that's really interesting. Now, obviously, I'm sure you're aware of the other reports from Pawtuckaway area. It seems to be there's been quite a few I've heard over the years from that area, from other researchers and other folks as well. That's a little bit over towards kind of the seacoast area-ish, I suppose.
Specifically towards the north side of that park, I've gotten, I think, 3 from that
3.
area.
Wow. So Carrick, who is a fellow New Hampshire researcher, been on the show many times. He's a favorite to host the show as well. He says Nottingham has a sighting under its belt. A cyclist claimed to have seen a Sasquatch on the side of the road. I grew up doing a bit of squatching there. Yeah, I've been to the park there as well. Not only that one, but just as you mentioned, you have some. I've heard some from other researchers, different groups. So it's pretty interesting. I've heard one adjacent, I suppose, just a little bit. Oh gosh, what was the name of the town? I'm looking at the map here. It was a little bit over towards Bear Brook, where I had heard of a report up on a power line of a police officer who had actually seen some kind of ape-like creature.
Is it Northwood or Deerfield by any chance?
I would have to look back into my archives. I just have my map pulled up here because I'm looking at Pawtuckaway. Yeah, it was from quite a while ago. A friend of mine had actually this officer contact him and told him about what had happened. They were investigating this kind of rundown house that I've been there, and it's this decrepit, falling apart house near this power line area. And power lines seem to be a pretty common motif for reports in New Hampshire.
The power lines run right by Stevens Hill. It's a 4-way intersection of the power lines.
So power lines seems to be something there. I mean, it makes sense if you just look at it from wildlife perspective. Lots of animals use the power lines to move through. It's the path of least resistance. If it's already there, why not use it instead of having to bushwhack, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's really, really interesting. I know that Sasquatch Story says it's a New Hampshire homecoming tonight. Hope everyone is doing well. Thanks. Yeah, it's a lot of Northeast folks tonight, which is awesome. Yeah. So after that happened, I mean, did that also kind of make you want to go deeper into finding out more about the subject, or what did it, or did it kind of freak you out, or what was the deal?
It definitely did freak me out. I wasn't expecting it to be that large. It kind of put a pause on me going camping and that type of stuff. And it kind of put me in a state that I kind of reverted from the woods in a way, so to speak. But at the time, I wasn't working a great job. I wasn't able to go up to the White Mountains or any of the hiking trails locally that I have. But yeah, it definitely took a turn for me to stay out of the woods for a little bit, but I did return to that area probably about like a week later, just to drive through, because I'm in a car. I mean, I know these things can apparently run pretty fast, but better safe than sorry being in the car.
So, yeah, no, totally. Tactical Bigfoot research. This is Mike. We haven't seen you in a while on the show, Mike. How's it going, man? He asks, what type of headlight was New Hampshire Squatch using?
It was just a basic headlight on a 2015 Nissan Altima. So
Gotcha.
Nothing too special, I would have to say.
Pretty
pretty
stock
basic.
Kind of run of the mill. Yeah. No, totally. He's
not a car guy.
Right. No, Mike is a definitely a gear guy. So it's interesting details like that. What type of lighting? Let's say you had some sort of those horrible silver lights that I feel like your car gets behind you and it's almost like the high beams are on. The lights are just that powerful. So I don't know. It's always interesting when people ask those questions like that.
Nothing like that. I know.
Right.
Your basic run of the mill.
Sure. No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, appreciate you sharing those encounters. Now, when you started the New Hampshire Sasquatch page and you started kind of looking for reports, did you have people that you knew that were telling you reports, or how did you get into the process of kind of gathering them? Because I know for me, it wasn't really an organic, or it was, I guess, an organic process. I just sort of started meeting people, and then at events, people would tell you stuff. And I even got a few actually this weekend up in the Lake Champlain Festival. I ran into 2 folks from New Hampshire have had encounters, wood knocking encounters, and other encounters in the state. So it's kind of sporadic. I was just wondering, what did you kind of do?
So, as you know, New Hampshire is severely lacking in the Bigfoot community with sightings. There's not a lot of them that are out in the open. There's not a lot of people that will come forward. It's very much a culture like Louisiana and the South, with only if you know someone, that's when they will talk
Yeah.
to you, and they usually keep to themselves otherwise. So it was actually my girlfriend that got me onto the idea of making my own page to share stories with people
Oh, nice.
that might have not been comfortable sharing them with the larger groups or stuff like that. I just want to give people an outlet. I know I was a person that was struggling with what happened with me. I have heard many stories beforehand that weren't, out there. And I had to know these people. So I kind of got out there and started, talking to people a little bit more. I had a friend that knew quite a few people from a hunting club that was located in Carroll County, that they had a few encounters with 2 sightings, a couple wood knocks, and I believe some vocalizations coming out of Carroll
Hmm.
at a hunting plot that they had. And apparently, what this particular Sasquatch was doing was it would go up to the cornfield and it would be grabbing handfuls of cornfield and go back into the woods.
Wow.
But they were told by the property owner to keep their mouth shut or they're going to get shot and lose the land.
Wow.
But
Boy.
yeah, there's a lot of harsh people that are around here. As you probably know, there's a lot of people that will actually threaten you mortally.
Yeah, there's so much private land in New Hampshire. I mean, it's tough in that respect because most of it is private land, especially in central and southern parts of the state. So people get pretty territorial, and I've experienced that too, where you really have to know somebody for them to share their story. They're not trusting at first. People up here are um, not really as, I don't know, friendly, I guess, to people. Just kind of, if you're just coming in, if you're just a flatlander coming into the mountains,
Oh yeah,
don't expect to have the
God
welcome
forbid you have
wagon.
Massachusetts license plates and you come through here.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously New Hampshire is big with tourism. I mean, that's one of the main driving forces in our economy. But they keep to themselves, like with those kinds of stories, especially, and that's I think in general across northern New England and Vermont and parts of Maine. I've heard similar things from researchers in those areas that a lot of times people won't even talk about their encounters until they're retired because they don't want to jeopardize their job at the time, especially if they work with the outdoors, let's say Forest Service folks or logging. That may be something that, oh, you're the Bigfoot guy now. That's something people are going to taunt you with for years. That's not something most people want to deal with.
Yeah, I actually had one of my first encounters I posted happened up in Dixville Notch
Oh,
by
nice.
a wildlife conservation officer, and his superior actually told him that if you go and sharing this with the other officers or anyone, you can throw your career goodbye.
Yeah,
And this guy actually ended up. It happens with a lot of people. They ended up like deleting their messages over Instagram, or they ask you to delete their messages. This guy was
sure.
very paranoid, and I got back in contact with him, asking him some questions regarding another podcast I was going to be on. And yeah, he got really pissed off. He ended up blocking me because of that, and I just asked him a few questions.
Wow.
His son apparently works over in the western part of the state, but I'm not going to relay any more information farther than that.
I totally understand that. I have probably about 3 to 4 dozen reports in my database that a lot of them, it's just that kind of thing. You meet the person, you talk to them for a little bit, they feel comfortable enough to share, and then they'll tell you their story and they'll say, if you ever put it out there, just please don't put my name on it.
Oh yeah,
So
that's
it's
90% of my
interesting.
encounters.
Right. And I that's what I appreciate kind of what you're doing with having a New Hampshire specific thing. I mean, I'm here from New Hampshire, but I'm all over the place in terms of where we go to. We're in California. We'll be out in the West again. the trends everywhere are similar. I've seen
Yeah.
other parts of the country where there is a little bit more of an opening up down south, and um, in the Intermountain West, there's more of an embrace in rural areas of the Sasquatch because people are realizing it's a driver for maybe tourism and that kind of thing, especially. But with that comes the possibility of encounters, people maybe being more open with sharing the stories. And that's what I wanted to read this comment from Brian. He says, shows like this, people are starting to open up in the Northeast about their encounters. And right after that, username just D says, I encountered one in the New Hampshire woods, adult and a small one. Craziest thing I've ever experienced, still gives me chills. Please feel free to share this story. They said it happened in southern New Hampshire near Goffstown, so not even that
Oh,
far off from
yeah.
Manchester. Really interesting. I would love to
Yeah.
hear that, D. If you want to send a message or leave a comment, please let us know. I mean, either one of us will keep that information.
Yeah.
Obviously, whatever information you don't want shared, I completely believe in respecting the what people are telling. You know, kind of like what you're saying with the officer. You know, just keeping that information out of the public eye if they don't want it out there.
I just want to bring this up real quick, mentioning what that individual just mentioned. I actually had a encounter come in a week prior to where I found a footprint of a juvenile, a potential one. I don't call anything. Um, I don't put anything set in stone until I have it confirmed by multiple sources, but it's clearly a human-esque footprint that was from the White Mountains, and it was a female and a very young juvenile that was described as a toddler, so to speak,
Wow.
up in the White Mountains. And it was a week prior to where I found this track less than a mile away.
See, that's so interesting because you know, as great as eyewitness stories are, unfortunately, they don't constitute the best of evidence, especially to those more skeptically minded people that will often be the naysayers and whatnot. But if you can take, let's say, a sighting and you're able to find a track or some sort of other evidence that helps corroborate that, that's amazing. So you have a report and you have something you're able to find, even if you maybe weren't aware of that, you found out eventually. So
Oh yeah,
that's fantastic.
tree structures, for example. The state's littered with them. I mean, not every tree overlapping on a log is a tree structure, but
Of
there's some
course,
pretty
yeah.
elaborate structures I have found deep in the woods, like nowhere close to where humans probably have been before.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen stuff like that up in Berlin, New Hampshire. I used to spend a lot of time up there with a
Yeah,
researcher friend of mine.
yep. I
And
I actually just mentioned that to Brian earlier today. I think it was today or yesterday.
yeah,
Berlin.
there's a lot of reports up in that area. And the Wood Devil story, people still talk about up in Coos County and Berlin, especially. There's a fantastic history there. I did want to read a few more comments here. I'm having trouble keeping up with it all. There's so many great ones. But Andrea says, I experienced the infrasound just before dawn one morning. It woke me up from a sound sleep and it terrified me. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. The vibration goes to your core.
Yep.
Huh. Really interesting.
Yep.
Ryan Corboy says, every time I watch Northwoods Law, I ask myself if any of those conservation officers had some type of encounter. I mean, some of them have had to. Yeah, that show. So, folks that might know the show Northwoods Law, it's in New Hampshire at least the last few seasons since they moved from Maine. So, pretty interesting. Now, there was one question I did want to ask from Carrick. He says infrasound is frightening. I'd love to know if our guest in his research has come across similar reports to his own and thinks territorial displays suggest something about the nature of Bigfoot.
That's a very difficult question because I associate all Sasquatch as more like people than animals, so to say. Each one that you find is going to be different from the other. It's not like
Right.
let's say, a mountain lion, um, which I've had a run in the White Mountains before with a mountain lion, and Fish and Game never believed me. So, because no mountain lions are in New Hampshire, I've known many people that have seen mountain lions, but you can basically predict what a mountain lion will do or a bear for that matter. There's even tactics that people like tell you that if you encounter a bear, you yell at them because they're more than likely to run if, you make yourself all big and mean and yell at the bear. They will usually, turn tail and run. On the other hand, you can't just go up to a person out in, let's say, like, a downtown area, so to speak, and get all big and mad at them. Either you're going to have one that's going to turn around and run, or you're going to have another one that's going to fight, or one that's going to look at you like, what the hell's wrong with you? And that's how I see it, and what I have observed with encounters that I have received, and basically what I encountered with the one in Nottingham and the one in some of them that I've encountered in the woods, but I didn't see with territorial displays. But I do believe that they are a territorial animal, and I'd imagine that's the males that are more territorial than the females would be. But they could be like bears. If they have a juvenile around, they could be more protective over their young or a food supply, water source, shelter. I can almost say with certainty, if you get too close to their home base, so to speak, that they will drive you out.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I've certainly heard reported elsewhere as well. And it makes sense if you think about the behaviors. The only thing we really have, people get really upset, whenever you mention chimps or gorillas or anything like that. I'm not saying these things are exactly like chimps or gorillas, but those are the only other known hominids or hominoids that we are aware of that we can study. And what always interests me and really gets me is all these behaviors that have been reported in North America for so many decades that we then later learned are actually a behavior that a gorilla might use, or chimps, with throwing rocks against trees to communicate, or gorillas controlling their scent glands when they're angry or agitated. These sorts of things, even some of those masks, tribal masks that show the puckering of the lips or the showing of the teeth. And I've heard of encounters as well where the teeth have been bared, and that's sort of an intimidation thing. So it's really interesting. And again, I'm not suggesting these things are just big dumb apes in the woods, but I think they're somewhere, in a much more intelligent spot than we would maybe some people are comfortable with. So it's really interesting to hear that about the behaviors.
I do 100% agree that on one thing, though, is that there is different types of Sasquatch. Types 1 through 4, for example, you have the ones that look like chimps, orangutans, specifically like the skunk ape. You got the ones that are like the patties. You got the proto-humans, which is kind of more similar to the one that I saw up here. And you have the ones that have like the baboon type of muzzle. So I do believe that some of them are a little bit more intelligent than others, and each subspecies, so to say, would be less aggressive or more aggressive according to their species.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know how much I share in that thought, but I think that there are definitely subspecies, especially in the sense of the regional factor, as well as the possibility of certain areas where genetic, things are going wrong. That happens with animals when the populations, let's say they're cut off in a certain area, inbreeding might happen. Maybe that leads to some difficulties. So it's interesting. No, there's a wide spectrum of what people reported in terms of, as you mentioned, chimps. I can even think of a report I have up from the White Mountains of a man seeing one that was scratching its back up against a telephone pole and had a very baboon-like face. But
are you talking about the Conway encounter?
Yeah, it's pretty close to Conway.
Yeah. All right. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I met that guy at an event a few years ago, told me a story, and a lot of people like to talk about the dogman stuff, and I don't usually talk about that a whole lot, but I asked him, do you think it might have been what people talk about as dogman? He didn't seem to think so, at least from what he told me then. And
I don't know how I feel about that whole dogman situation.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to tell people that it's fake unless it's proven fake or real. That's how
Totally.
I see it.
Yeah, no, I tell people, I think the possibility of a undiscovered giant canine walking on two legs seems a little far fetched for me personally. But I've been to Louisiana, heard the Rougarou story. There's a lot of these stories around the world. I don't know, maybe that's more on the paranormal spectrum.
Yep.
That's not really stuff that I touch, but it's certainly interesting, and people like to talk about it. Absolutely.
Oh
So,
yeah, I've had a really weird encounter that I actually posted that was from just outside of New Orleans,
oh, right on.
from a New Hampshire resident, and apparently it was after a hurricane
I think I
in the
read that. Yeah.
90s, and this it just basically flooded and damaged a bunch of graves, and there was a more recent grave that this guy, well, the grave attendant at the time was checking out, and he reported seeing a female, um, kind of baboon like Sasquatch type of thing, Rougarou, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
and it pulled the corpse out of the grave site because they're mostly raised graves over there, and chucked it over its shoulder and walked off into the woods. Mind you, it was all flooded over there, so he couldn't find tracks. And apparently, they sent a native officer, police officer, over to the site, and they had to put it down as a animal disturbance or something like that. And they wouldn't talk about it anymore until about 1 or 2 weeks later that they actually found the remains of the corpse. But with all the chemicals that they put on corpse
Yeah.
nowadays, it's kind of hard to think whether or not if that creature would have died from it or if the story is fabricated.
Yeah, that's tricky. But I mean, I know I don't know if I don't know much about embalming, but I think formaldehyde is something that is used, and that's actually something that oftentimes is put in styrofoam that or some of these kinds of materials that can appeal to bears, for example. Apparently, that smells like honey to them. So there's been instances of bears, attacking linings of refrigerators with formaldehyde in them.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just interesting. I mean, would that be something that might appeal to an organism? I don't know, but again, not to talk too much about that whole werewolf, dogman, rougarou stuff. It's certainly interesting. I mean, especially if you look at it from the cultural lens. I'm not going to go to Louisiana and tell Cajun people who have been living in this crazy swamp environment that what these stories are not invalid just because I'm.
You'd probably go missing if you told them that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
they're
right.
toss you to gators.
You got to have some respect for the local cultures, whether they're indigenous or people that settled really tough areas. I mean, the Cajuns did not have a easy history, being basically kicked out of British Canada and having to flee to an area completely different to where they've been living for a few hundred years.
Oh
So
yeah.
you got to take all that into account. But man, there's so many great comments in the in the comment section. I'm having trouble keeping up with everything. But somebody mentioned Whitehall. Christopher says Whitehall is a great place for finding evidence. I found 2 sets of tracks in the mud up there. Really interesting. If you have any pictures or anything, love to see that. Like I said, I was just there yesterday. We were going around we went to Abear Road. Paul Bartholomew was showing us. Ryan says, for sure on Whitehall. I've heard them on the other side of Lake George, not far from Whitehall, really. I know a couple people have had encounters right near that Lake George, Lake Champlain
In
area.
that vicinity, yeah.
Yeah, Steve calls. Lots of people have researched in that area too. It's definitely the East Coast Bigfoot capital of the world for notoriety,
For
if
sure.
anything. So Squatch Talk asks, I wonder how they deal with the snow load up there. Any thoughts on that?
That's where I kind of get to the fact that I believe that they do migrate. I know for what I've done, I've plowed up in Coos County up in the past, and
Sure.
during their snowstorms, which are, if you live in the southern part of the state, we don't get nothing compared to them. It's
Yeah, oh, totally.
it's brutal up there. But I can't really say that I believe or think that they would stay in that area. Um, Roughly because of the food. You got birds that migrate. I believe that they use birds as a food source, as well as a deer. I mean, deer would be easier to track, but coming from like a animal that can be well over 1,000 pounds, that caloric intake would be absurd, and they would start picking off feed from farms, livestock, pets. I would even believe that they would go after people given the chance. Hence
Yeah.
the 411 stories, but I do believe that they do move on. I do believe that they are smarter most of the time um, when it comes to going after people, because I believe if they did
Yeah.
want a lot of the people that have seen them, me for example, they could have had them.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. I think if these things were deadly killers, like is often portrayed in every cheesy sci-fi flick about Bigfoot, it would be a very different situation.
Oh yeah,
Their prerogative is clearly staying, for the most part, hidden or in control of an encounter. If you do have it, it's usually, they're the ones in control of what's going on. Much like gorillas and chimps, they allow you to see them. You don't just sneak up on one. It's impossible.
oh yeah,
So uh, that's definitely something I think for the most part. I mean, then again, you'll go back to some of the stories in the First Nations and Native American tribes about the cannibal giants and that sort of thing. And
the
maybe in the
Wendigo
past,
for that matter too.
but you see the way that society is now. We pretty much destroy and bulldoze right into an environment and kill everything. If something comes for one of us, we take 100 of them, kind of thing. So I think adaptive behavior, and if you look at sort of that parallel evolution of, you grow up, or you not grow up, but I suppose individuals would grow up, but you have a sort of parallel culture that's existing side by side of humanity, which is ever expanding. They would clearly have to adapt in some ways to our aggressive behaviors and our territories. And I think the Sasquatch managed to weave in and out in a way. They're right on the peripheries, just enough space where there's maybe the curiosity factor there. But like I said, I think that generally it seems they're in control of encounters when they seem to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty interesting. Yeah, people were talking about in the comments about that trackway found in Minnesota. I remember that video. Absolutely mind blowing. It was right on the Canadian border. They followed it. There was hundreds of tracks, and then it sort of disappeared. It started going over an area where there wasn't any snow, and they weren't able to pick it up again. But they were the middle of nowhere. Um, yeah, I think in terms of the snow load, just to go back to that question, like I said, I think if you look at cedar swamps in particular in New England, those areas are always a couple degrees warmer than just a forest with deciduous trees. You have cedars, you have pines, where there's a little bit more cover, maybe a little bit more comfortability. That's where moose will sometimes hang out in those areas. So I think there's a possibility that they, as we talked about before, that they move around. At least
Now,
that's what I think.
now I've you know there was a encounter that I did receive from Mount Kerrigan with foraging mushrooms,
Okay,
for
interesting.
example. So there was that idea that I was throwing around a little bit, and I did have that encounter in the archives for a little while. But there is that option. We do have winter oyster mushrooms that grow in bunches by the pound that will grow on trees everywhere around the state. Matter of fact, I see them driving down the road a lot, especially in the wintertime. That could be a food source, but I believe that it's a food source that would not sustain a well over 1,000 pound creature. So there
Yeah.
is that aspect, but I believe that they are much more of the hunter gatherer type, and they would pack out when the snow is there.
Right. Well, it seems like from a lot of the reports we have, there's a very omnivorous sort of characteristic with Sasquatch. It seems that they're very opportunistic in terms of what they eat all across the spectrum, and as most apes are omnivores. So I mean that makes sense to me. Kevin Hamilton brings up a good point. He says polar bears can go without food for 5 to 10 days at a stretch. So large mammals don't necessarily need to eat every single day. Yeah, that's true. Maybe there's
True.
adaptive behaviors. I mean, there's just so much to think about. What I love about this topic, and even if you don't necessarily believe or have had encounters, you still you ask these kinds of questions, and it gets your mind wondering, and then you start learning about why is it that polar bears can go with 5 to 10 days without eating. I mean, that's something that you probably didn't know before, and you learn all these other things about the world, and that ultimately will make you a better, I guess, researcher. Just you're learning a lot about the environment, especially if you're focusing on a specific area. So um, I would say to the naysayers, this is it's we're all learning, we're all trying to teach each other, open source with information as well. So
There's no such thing as an expert in this field.
oh, absolutely, I agree. There's people that might know about a particular area more, And that's, like I was saying earlier, you don't just go to a spot that you're not familiar with and assume you know everything. I go to a different state. I want to talk to the people who live there, the
Oh
locals,
yeah.
the wildlife folks in that area. You want to learn as much as you can about areas. So
And there's plenty of people, especially in this area, that think that they do know everything, but go out to the landowners and
yeah,
the hunters and all that have been out in the woods, and they hear things and they see things that they can explain, and they lived here all their life. That kind of puts down the know-it-alls back in
definitely.
their place.
Definitely. Well, I think a lot of it is, unfortunately in this field, you get a lot of people who get in it for the wrong reasons, or it's just ego.
Oh
And
yeah.
some people just, there's an ownership thing. They say, let's say, because I'm from New Hampshire, right? I think I'm Mr. New Hampshire Bigfoot and I own the state now, and anyone else who's getting into it, they got to come through me. You're almost like being a gatekeeper. No, I don't care. Sure, I love the New Hampshire stuff. I want to get it on the map, but ultimately, there's people like yourself who are wholly focused mostly on the New Hampshire report. So
Yeah.
do your thing. I think if we can exchange information and work together, that's I think more beneficial than everyone doing their own thing. But like I said, there's people that aren't in it for the right reasons.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of people that are pretty aggressive in this Bigfoot field around here, and people are pretty defensive when it comes to their ideas and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot. I've just experienced it throughout the whole Bigfoot community. I mean, around
Oh yeah.
the country, it's like it's so dysfunctional and crazy at times. It's like it's honestly why I've backed out a lot of times and just focused on other cryptids and doing other things because my interest is not solely Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I do other cryptids as well. Just speaking personally, but I can see why a lot of newbies that maybe get into it are like, I don't want anything to do with these people online. There's folks that will. I've met people, for example, that have had an encounter that happened many years ago, and they didn't know, they didn't even maybe think it was Bigfoot. Then they go online and they start reading about, well, other people have had this kind of thing happen to them, and that becomes a validation for them. But then once you start getting involved in a lot of the Bigfoot politics, oh, it's a nightmare, and I can
It's
see why,
so dumb.
and I can see exactly why people want to remain anonymous, don't want their information out there, and we can only be respectful to that and in general, because society as a whole is not accepting of this topic. In the Bigfoot community, there's plenty that aren't accepting and will immediately put down eyewitnesses as they're all dumb or they're all misidentifying something, and
Oh yeah.
it's it's
Definitely.
it's too bad. If you don't treat an eyewitness with respect, at least, how are you going to get all the full details of the story? That's the way I see it, at least.
That's part of the reason why I kept my encounter story kind of down and low, and I only shared
Sure.
my other encounters such as like the rock throw and
Yeah.
the infrasound, and I've had a few other ones, but like I get it. Like there's some people that know it all, but there's some people that actually do see something and they need to get that out there.
Oh, for sure. And this is something I had to read from Sasquatch Story. It says, always jars me in the description of these beings being able to drop down so fast and crawl eerie. That I was just talking to a couple people about that. That's like the creepiest thing to me. Imagine seeing this like crawling thing, and that's been described in some of the encounters. People being shocked by it, and almost like a spider crawling around. That is more creepy to me than just seeing one standing
You
right
know,
in front of you.
is it the thermal footage that came out of Florida of one stealing a candy bar somewhere down south?
It was North Carolina. Mike Green,
Oh yeah.
awesome video of. I was actually just listening to a show he was on, a video he was on. He's down in North Carolina. That was the Uwharrie National Forest. So I guess he had left some candy bars out on this stump, and then left his thermal imager, left the area for 2 hours, and then came back, and that was then filmed on there. Apparently, it kind of waited for him to leave, and then it was super cautious even when he wasn't there, and then you can see it grabbing the candy bar and still swaying between the trees as if like extreme caution. So that was really interesting. There's also the one in Texas, I think, of the hand sticking out from behind the pile of wood.
Yeah, it's uncanny just thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. Very just creepy. I mean, it's like doing a crab walk on the ground kind of thing. That's something that's been reported. So I don't know. That's a little definitely scary to think about something like that. But yeah, Squash Talk says the Bigfoot community online is exclusively separate from the actual phenomenon. That's a pretty good way of putting
Yeah,
it, actually. Definitely. They're more interested in the politics around, what's going on. And it's like anything humans get involved in. You get cliques, you get subsets. The Bigfoot community in general is a subset of a larger society, obviously. But within that, you have so many subdivisions, and it's stupid and
definitely is.
whatever. What are you going to do? But Ryan asks, do you think there is anything to fear that people feel when near these creatures is described so often? Could this simply be just enormous amount of energy they have, or infrasound, or both?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, there, some people can give off like energies and that type of thing,
Yeah.
and you can definitely feel a vibe from them. But I do believe that, for example, like the telepathy part could be infrasound and like a primordial aspect
Yeah.
of like your body, like telling you, okay, it's time to get out of here.
That's a really
Stay
good point.
still. That's what I personally believe it is. Doesn't mean that I'm right, but it. I have felt them around in a way that I can feel them staring me down. Doesn't mean that could be something else, but you kind of feel when they are around, and you get a real piercing feeling. They
Yeah,
give you
that's
a real mean feeling.
it's that classic sort of I feel like I'm being watched feeling, and I've only had that happen a few times where it's so tangible. I mean, you feel that creep factor. One of which happened in New Hampshire as well with a friend of mine who didn't know anything about the topic, and we happened to be standing next to this kind of weird structure looking thing, and now it's one of my research areas now, but I just had this tingling feeling, and I'm thinking in my head, I feel something's watching. And at the same exact moment, my friend just blurts out, "Dude, I think we're being watched." And I turn to him and I'm like, "How did you know what I was thinking?" And
Yeah,
so it's really interesting you bring up the infrasound point about maybe it's your own mind just giving you this message, and then it turns out, well, this thing was maybe talking to me. I don't know. That's certainly, you're trying to get a plausible explanation for a seemingly implausible phenomena.
well, yeah, and especially like when you're trespassing their areas. I brought up briefly to you that I had a situation that happened with my girlfriend and my son uh, about a month ago, that we were driven out of the area that we were foraging in southern Maine. And
Nice.
I mean, they weren't giving us like the infrasound. They did a roaring growl type of noise, like a grouchy moan type of thing. Would not sounded off in successions of like 3 and 2 from two different locations, and
Hmm.
there was a tree that got pushed over. And mind you, this happened when we were getting all that smoke from out west.
Yeah, right.
Completely still day, no wind whatsoever. As soon as that tree fell and that grumbling noise came off, everything went silent in that woods. And my girlfriend freaked out. The motherly instincts kicked in, like,
Right.
get the hell off that hill right now. Like, I just told her, don't, just keep calm, just keep walking, don't do anything. And that was set off by her knocking two sticks together playing with my infant son. Yeah, she doesn't
Interesting.
want to go back anymore, though. Unfortunately, that's a great area for foraging too.
Oh boy, I bet. Something I talked about this on a live stream I did a few days ago on I was at Lake Champlain. Something Carrick and I actually had happened to us this weekend. We were camped in this spot in the Green Mountains of Vermont, and I'm still not prepared. I'm still reviewing the audio. It was a weird encounter. So we've camped in this spot. It was a dead end road, and it basically led up to just a little campsite. There was basically just a little pull off, a fire pit that had been built, and a spot to park and put your tent. Super nice area. I'm definitely going to go back to that spot. But we did some wood knocks that night. We set up a pheromone chip, one of the Sasquatch pheromones, and I was woken up about 5:36 in the morning by 3 knocks. And I always run audio at night. My audio recorder, of course, was dead at this point. It had died a little while before that, so I immediately turned it back on. It still had one leg of battery left. Carrot gets up, goes to use the bathroom, comes back. We're just kind of laying in the tent. We had no rain fly or anything on. We both hear this one knock. Immediately turns to me and says, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Yep." And then about 10 minutes later, we had 5 or 6 different things, 6 total, thrown in our direction.
Oh,
We could see something arching through the trees and coming down at us. There were some squirrels up in the tree earlier, but it was so the objects were so loud and sustained. It was really strange for it to have been just squirrel debris. There was no movement in the tree at all, and this stuff was just flying at us, and we were just sitting up and kind of like our hair on the backs of our neck was standing up. We were, oh my god, what is this?
oh, you
You know,
got my goosebumps going right now,
it's
man.
too good to be true kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not prepared to say what it was yet, but and if Carrick is in the comments listening, he can obviously relay from his side. But we got up and immediately pushed into the area where that was sounds were coming from, and there was a little grove if you went up past this path, and it was pine trees and a lot of pine needles and fern. So I guess if you wanted to slink out of an area, you probably could do it fairly quietly. I don't know. Again, I'm not prepared to say one way or another what it was. It was just really interesting because we had the pheromone chip up. We did do a lot of knocks, and I tried for the first time doing a technique where not only do I knock in camp, but I walked down the dirt road and just knocked on random trees all along and did multiple knocks with this like squatch knocker thing. So I don't know. It was interesting. Just something I wanted to share that just happened this past weekend. We're still looking at the audio and no idea what exactly was
You know
going
what could have aggravated them too? I've heard some people talk about this is, in particular, a human male, if they urinate on things, it will piss them off and will bring them in to get closer. If you are in their territory and you urinate on something, there could be that. Um,
Yeah, that's
humans
possible.
have been so removed from like the general, order of things for so long.
Yeah.
Maybe our pheromones aren't as potent, but
Yep.
it's still something that, you know, could go after their
Yeah.
females, God forbid.
I mean, I'm going to do some research into that area because that was in a national forest and it was basically a primitive campsite. So it was an area that primitive campsite was allowed or camping was allowed, dispersed camping, and there was
Yep.
a sign. We basically drove in as far as we could. There was another camper maybe 5 minutes down the road from us. They wouldn't have been close, but I'm really curious to see if that area has any. I know the Green Mountains have reports, but that area specifically, you'd think people they camp there pretty often, so there's probably. I'd be curious to see if there's anything else going on. I don't know if anyone's ever used Sasquatch pheromones in that spot. Those things are extremely pungent and unpleasant odor and
Oh,
everything. So,
I can imagine. I've
I
never
mean,
smelled it, but
oh man, you don't want to. I have to when I when I traveled to California with it, I had to basically put the jar because they're in a jar, but it doesn't do anything for the smell. It still stinks. I had to put it inside of a jar and then inside of 2 plastic bags. And I showed it on one of the streams because the last thing you want is that thing to open up in your suitcase and you have a stink bomb and there's
oh
no way
no,
you can get that stuff out. It
high
is bad.
school locker room type of thing. Ugh.
Dude, it's like the worst locker room smell mixed with dirty feet, but the smells are actually both human and gorilla, hormonal scents. Let's say to keep it PG as much as we can. Extremely gross, but Tactical Bigfoot Research says, Alex, did you feel or hear what seemed like heavy equipment working at the same time? Have either of you experienced that? Having an experience? Huh? Like in movement or what do you mean, Mike? If you want to just follow up with that.
Yeah, that would have to be a little bit more in depth for me to answer that because I have heard of things happening if they've cleared out a plot, especially with heavy equipment, and I've heard 2 stories of rocks being tossed through um, like the glass windows on
Oh
a
wow.
backhoe, but at the same time, that could be some teenagers coming through and just
Right.
causing a mess, or angry homeless man doing or person or doing that.
Right, right. Well, I mean, even one of the most famous Bigfoot stories of all time, obviously, where the term Bigfoot came from in Bluff Creek. I've got
Yep.
Bluff Creek on the mind since I'm editing this, but we went to the spots where they had reported the 55-gallon oil drums thrown into the creek and all that other kind of stuff, equipment messed with. And I've heard that in other places, equipment being messed with. Now, something I have heard is um, mimicking of mechanic, not heard personally, but heard stories of mimicking of equipment. people saying the car door slamming. That's something that seems to keep coming up. And then Mike follows up saying, like a bulldozer or backhoe hitting the ground.
Like noises, like
Yeah.
a wood knot coming from it, or
Yeah, I mean, power knocks. I've heard power knocks.
oh
That's
yeah,
probably the closest I could come to, like I guess a backhoe hitting the ground. Trees crashing, obviously but that's a distinct sound.
oh yeah, it is. Makes you jump.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's just a wide range of sounds, and I kind of attribute it to, you think about how you talk, the way you talk to your grandmother is probably different than how you talk to your friend. We have different tiers of language and ways of communicating. As you mentioned, even earlier, you said people give off an energy. You know, you see it, some dude, he gives off a bad vibe, like, I don't want to mess with this guy. I do not know what's up with this guy or what's going on. So, um, oh, actually, I do got to read this comment from Westport Aquarium. That's probably Mark Merzell. I would assume. It says Bigfoot, the term predated the Jerry Crew Bluff Creek area. Just my 2 cents. And Mark definitely has done his research. So interesting. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, the wide range of sounds that are reported now. Um, Something I did want to ask you about was one of the encounters I had seen that you had posted that I'd love to get you to talk about, or just read the encounter that you had submitted, the Mount Cabot encounter, the one with the dog.
Oh, the dog, yeah.
I
That
love Mount Cabot. I've camped at that cabin up there. It's a great spot. Um, one sec though. Mark says 1912 mine name in Southwest Oregon. Okay, interesting.
hmm.
But yeah. So floor is yours.
All right. So regarding Mount Cabot story, apparently there's this lady hiking up with her dog. Um, her dog was a little bit ahead of her. They were going up the mountain to watch the sunset. I don't remember all my the encounter stories. I do apologize. There's just so many of them. But the dog was kind of acting strange up ahead of her and started growling and kind of like nipping at like this one area to the right of the trail. And she'd never seen her dog act like this before ever. It was very alien to her. And mind you, a lot of the trails up in northern New Hampshire, you have pine trees that you can't see 3-4 feet into. So apparently, what happened was this dog stopped for a second as she was calling her dog's name, turned and looked at its owner, and the Sasquatch grabbed the dog, kind of came out a little bit into the trailway, and this lady was looking at the dog in the Sasquatch's hand around its neck, and she was in absolute fear, staring at this animal, creature, whatever you want to call it. And apparently, this Sasquatch was giving her very hateful vibes and saying into her head, so to speak, from what she described, you make one move and I'll kill you too. So apparently what happened, the dog was like, writhing around, kind of like whimpering, trying to get free. And she mumbled, please don't hurt my dog, something along that line. It just absolutely crying, unable to contain herself. And this animal cracked her dog's neck and killed it and ran off into the woods with her dog. She retreated back down the mountain. She told the local authorities, and they didn't really do anything about it. I'm pretty sure that they called the creature a bear, kind of just dismissing her. She knows that wasn't a bear. She called back, apparently, and there was no report whatsoever of the incident reported to the police, well, the local police, so to speak. But that is the main gist of the story.
Yeah, as Brian writes, no, I shouldn't have stayed on. The Cabot story terrified me. So I got to ask, where, did she reach out to you, or how did you find out about her encounter?
She reached out to me on Instagram, and she left me her phone number. I gave her a call. I talked to her on the phone,
Oh,
talked to her about her story, wrote it
yeah.
down, and the lady started breaking down in tears talking about it while she was on the phone with me. And
Oh
she
man.
is very much against the police right now regarding what happened. She, till this day,
Yeah.
that's how disturbed she is, as anybody can imagine, be it an animal of any type. People form connections with their animal that are very deep.
Of course.
And even I was just like, oh my God, like imagine if that happened to somebody's kid.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most horrific stories I've heard from New Hampshire.
It
Um,
hands down is the most
yeah,
horrific story I've heard from this area.
I
No doubt.
remember reading that. I think Brian had told me about that one, and I went hiking with Brian a couple weeks ago in the White Mountains, and we were talking about that too because he hikes with his dog all the time, and you do hear this so many times in this with this topic, dogs. There seems to be lots of encounters where there's aggression towards dogs, or it doesn't seem like they like dogs. Others where people claim the dogs have maybe interacted with them. I mean, maybe that's a temperamental thing, but it seems like such a hit or miss kind of thing. It's either you're going to have a good time or not. Dogs might provoke something or something like that. That's like your worst case scenario. I mean, if any animal were to do that to your dog, I mean, that would just be horrific, but let alone something that's not supposed to exist, right?
Yeah,
But
and what I'm thinking of, I mean, I see people with their dogs on, like, Instagram, for example, acting like their dog can stand up to Bigfoot or their dogs or whatever.
yeah,
That's not going to happen. These things are huge. Your little hound dog isn't going to do anything, let alone a pit bull. A pit bull
right.
won't do anything. Great Dane, obviously, uh, Mastiffs, Saint Bernards, anything. I'm
Yeah,
not going to say that they could stand a chance.
that's what, imagine even just a pit bull going up against a moose. I mean, how would that end? As tough as pit bulls are. So I think people they struggle to imagine, how massive these things are. But at least for us in New England, in northern New England especially, we have moose. They're the biggest animal around here. Sasquatch, notwithstanding. But you know, I don't know. It's just such a creepy encounter because I know that area. I've hiked Mount Cabot. I've stayed in that cabin up there, which I wouldn't really recommend it because there's mice that will break in all your stuff.
Oh
But
my God, yeah. That's a real problem with all, like, AT cabins in general,
yeah,
or shelters, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of talked my girlfriend out a little bit of hiking some of the AT,
yeah, right, right. So
because
those
there's
that's
so many parasites that can be picked up,
oh
from
yeah,
the mice droppings, and they don't always take care of them, especially in COVID.
yeah.
Like, I can only imagine what they're looking like right now.
Oh, probably, yeah. Probably not great. I mean, I stayed in that cabin. I think it was in October a few years ago. I was doing my 48 4,000 footers, and my buddy and I spent a night up there, and we got the first snow of the season up there. It's beautiful foliage down in the valley, and that, for those that don't know, we got a comment saying New Hampshire location. So this is Mount Cabot, which is the furthest north 4,000 footer. And when I say 4,000 footer, it's a mountain above 4,000 feet in New Hampshire. It's the furthest north. It has a cabin right around the 4,000 foot mark. It only goes to maybe a few hundred feet higher than that. But that cabin is right at the 4,000 foot mark. Beautiful location where it's at. And the trail, I can't imagine, after having something like that happen and still having to hike back down. I don't know how far in she was, but it's not an easy trail up there. It's a very wild area too, and especially depending on the
Yeah, she must have
conditions.
been a really, really avid hiker to be able to
Yeah,
do that. Just as like a sunset hike,
yeah,
and being, like, from New Hampshire and, like, knowing about, like, the terrain here, I prefer not to go up on any mountain at night. I have watched 4th of July fireworks from the top of Mount Chicora,
yeah.
but
Nice.
that is the closest I will go regarding anything mountain wise in New Hampshire at night. I've almost got lost on Mount Liberty and
Oh
I
yeah.
got off the mountain at 1 a.m. and I had to find my way down the mountain via a river. And I was with my friend who has a physical condition that he has his legs a little screwed up, and I was worried that he was going to fall and like die somewhere. I wasn't going to be
Yeah.
able to haul him out.
Yeah, it's no joke. People don't take the White Mountains seriously. They've claimed a lot of lives. I mean, I've hiked up and down, and I've seen some crazy scenarios. I've done a lot of sunrise or sunset hikes. You start at 3 in the morning, get up to the summit. I love it. It's beautiful, but you definitely you got to know what you're in for. And there's no joke up in those mountains. So um,
Somebody just died on Mount Kerrigan not too long ago, and
I read that. Yeah,
this past week, somebody got lost on Mount Hedgehog of all places.
yeah.
Several people. I mean, I don't know how you get lost on Mount Hedgehog, but to each their own.
People, I mean, people get lost in the Blue Hills of Massachusetts, which
Yeah,
is not a very it's just south of Boston, so people will get lost wherever. It's actually amazing. But even I remember even last September, I was first time I ever hiked up to the Cannon Cliff. You got Gilman Ridge, which is a very popular rock climbing ridge. To hike up there, you got to go up this talus field, just giant boulders. You start moving. I love the kind of wilder hikes like that. And I went up there, and that same weekend, 3 people died in that very spot in Franconia Notch. I think actually one person died on the Lafayette side, but 2 died in the rock climbing area. So it's no joke up in that area for sure, and people don't take it seriously.
oh
But
yeah, go up through some trails. A lot of like cliff areas.
yeah,
What is it? White Horse Cliff over in Conway.
yep,
There's a bunch
yeah.
of crosses there. People die all the time around there.
Yeah, it's Mount Washington gets a lot of the headlines because it's such a wild mountain, but people every year all over the mountains. It's
Tuckerman's Ravine, especially.
oh yeah, the snowfall, all that kind of stuff. But super interesting. I'm sure we could talk about the mountains there up there all the time. But oh, I did want to read that comment. Where is it from Brian? Well, I can't find it now, but he mentions that area being super, he says, very woodsy up there. You hit the fish hatchery, really beautiful place. Right as you're driving up to Mount Cabot, it's north of Berlin, New Hampshire, which, as we mentioned before, has a long history of reports. There's a fish hatchery right there run by the state. So, I mean, that's a good place for potential food
Oh
sources.
yeah, I'd love to hear some of their stories from there.
Totally. So, and
Yeah.
then right when you get back there, it's the Kilkenny Wilderness and the White Mountain Wilderness. So there's just nothing in that area. And I've heard of some reports in that Kilkenny area as well. And then once you get into the other parts of Coas County, I mean, it's just so wild up there. But we do have some other questions and comments. So Salvatore Bruno asks, do Sasquatch in cold weather areas, i.e. New Hampshire, have more hairy bodies than warmer climate states? Thoughts? Interesting.
Um, I can't say it because I'm not an expert, but
Yeah.
the one that I saw, for example, it was not totally covered in hair. I mean, there are some spots that you can, of course, see part of their skin, but um, from what I've observed, it's not really fur, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they would be able to, change their coats throughout the year. I think there would be a lot more hair samples if that was the case.
Yeah. Right.
Um, that's a very good question. I have heard reports of like very short-haired creatures down the south. That only makes sense. But the ones up here, yeah, I've mainly heard between 4 and 6 inch hair
Right.
as
Yeah.
described.
I was just going to say the same. I've heard a wide spectrum of reports in terms of people comparing to the Patterson Gimlin film and in being like the shorter hair versus some very shaggy, even long hair, even beards described. I mean, maybe that just depends from creature to creature. And as you talked about different types, different subspecies, what are we dealing with? Some that might, for whatever reason, certainly like, for example, people from different backgrounds have a lot more hair.
The woods
Uh,
devils, for example, up in Coas,
yep.
they're known for having very, very short hair, and I have a encounter on there
And
Um,
gray hair as well.
yeah, I believe it was a gray-haired one that I actually had on that encounter.
Oh, right on.
And apparently the guy can see its chapped butt cheeks or something, like a baboon,
Yeah. Oh, that is so interesting. Yeah,
and
you
it's
think
very
about,
bony.
yeah, I mean, Old Yellowtop, right? In there in Ontario, described as having like a blonde spot or something lighter patch of hair on the head. I mean, you wonder if the just all the variations, color, certain factors that might affect it. Mangy. Some people say you could see the chest and the skin very well. Other people say it was super hairy. Even the face was hairy. There seems to be a lot of different descriptions. So it's really interesting.
I have one that's coming up. That is from, I believe, around Jackson, New Hampshire,
Right on. Super nice area.
and apparently this creature had pimples on it.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah. Man, it's weird, no one likes pimples, but in this
Oh,
case, it's an
yeah,
interesting piece of data, right?
yeah. I mean, it could mean that they have pores similar to humans more so
Yeah.
than like apes, because I can't really say that I've heard a lot of things
Apes with
about
acne.
pimples on apes.
Yeah,
A lot of animals don't always like secrete the sodium out of their skin and like sweat, for
sure.
example. So there is that, and that could lead to the scent of a Sasquatch that people report. But I haven't had a single report out of around here. I'm pretty sure that I can
Hmm.
remember that they have described a odor.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, maybe that it's obviously skunk ape stuff that would be, maybe living in the environment, but
Well, that's Florida in general.
yeah, I mean,
Florida
I
smells.
I probably smell like a skunk ape when I'm down there most of the time, just given the weather.
Yeah,
But no, it's something because it's not a majority of reports that have this odor associated at all. But
yeah,
so that's what kind of makes me wonder if it's an environmental factor, or that gorilla controlling the scent gland kind of thing. Because I've heard multiple people too also describe it as smelling like a monkey house. Like you go to the zoo, you go to the ape house, it's got a distinct odor. People have
yeah.
described that smell when encountering these things. I've heard at least three or four that come to my mind, including one in New Hampshire, like that with that particular scent. So um, I don't know. Interesting. Musky dog smell, wet dog smell that too. But Greg Morrill asks or writes, Indigenous people would offer tobacco to Bigfoot as offering. Do you think the smell of tobacco would attract them? Should I start smoking cigars when I'm squatching? Probably look like a cool dude doing it, but I don't know.
I think the smell of smoke would possibly drive them away. Um, I mean, for me, for example, I'm an ex-smoker, and nowadays, the smell of smoke is absolutely. I can't take it. I can't take the smell of smoke. So I'd
Yeah.
imagine it's the same way for them. For tobacco, there was the guy that was out in, I believe it was California, that got abducted by Sasquatches. That he gave the Sasquatch some of his chewing tobacco.
Oh, the
And
Albert
he got,
Osman story.
yep, and he got a head rush off of eating a whole thing of chewing tobacco,
That's how he
and
got
ran down to
away.
the river.
Yeah, that's how he got away. That was, I think that was actually in Canada. That was, I want to say Alberta or even British Columbia. But yeah,
It's
that's
so confusing with those areas at times, but
yeah, no, no, totally. But that's, one of those stories like Ape Canyon that people always like to, as Greg says, Ostman. Yeah, people like to point to because it's just such a wild story. You got Jacko, some of these classic stories, the Teddy Roosevelt one, Daniel Boone Yahoo story. But something I do want to say in terms of the tobacco stuff. So recently got Michelle Soulier's book Bigfoot in Maine. She just put out, and we included that interview with her in our Maine Beyond the Trail of episode. She talked about an encounter that happened in Maine where they were offering tobacco, and it was they were putting raw tobacco out, right? Either leaves or basically just tobacco that you're going to roll or put into a pipe, as if that was somehow an offering. And I mean, it's very interesting with the indigenous idea that Greg brings. We actually tried that in Maine. We put out some tobacco in our area just to see, maybe if that was an enticing thing, just a little pile as an offering. I don't know. I mean, there's so many different ideas. We try them all, and if nothing works, then I mean, I don't know. We're just kind of trying it as it's coming along. There's actually a comment from Northwoods with Chaz who said native North American medicinal tobacco is grown for the purpose and or grown for that purpose and lacks the processing of commercial tobacco that is infused often with nicotine.
Huh.
Really interesting.
Yep.
Bigfoot Anon says, "Hey Alex, casted a track tonight. The one I posted this morning. Love seeing Greg and Jeremiah here. Awesome. Yeah, I'll check out. I haven't seen the track. I've been so up my own. You know what? Working on this project, I'm going crazy here. So this has actually been a really nice break from editing and doing other work. So yeah, really interesting, man. Talking to you. If you had one encounter that you've heard or been told that really kind of sticks out to you, aside from the Cabot one, that just intrigues you, you know, I know that's probably tough to pick, but is there one in particular that really kind of stands out to you?
There is the one that took place on Bear Notch Road of the juvenile screwing around the photographer.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
And that actually is debatable because I've had one person suggest that it was another New Hampshire cryptid, the devil monkey.
Okay.
So
Carrick would he's doing a project on devil monkeys as well. So
yeah, so that one definitely did stick out with me. It's an area that well, a lot of New Hampshire residents are familiar with Bear Notch.
I love Bear Notch Road.
It's such a beautiful place, and that's probably the one that sticks out with me the most. The fact that it was kind of making barking noises, and the thing ran off into the woods, vocalizing the entire time, and he heard the creature vocalizing all the way down, going towards what mountain is it? Towards like the Mount Chicora area,
Yep.
so to speak, going down through like the little valley down there, following the river.
Yeah. I mean, that area is beautiful. For folks that don't know, Bear Notch Road is a small road in the White Mountains near Bartlett, and it's actually seasonal. So they don't plow it at all. It's closed during the winter, so you can only really get into it in the summer and the fall. And during leaf peeping season, it's a great way to cut from the Kankamangas Highway onto
Rio
Bartlett.
too.
Yeah, into Bartlett or whichever other way. You know, if you're coming from, depends if you're coming the Lincoln Way or North Conway. Yeah, it's a good way to cut through the mountains. Otherwise, you have to really go back either route. But man, that's awesome. Yeah, what I love about the White Mountain reports in the national forest is you just have such a huge area that you have a good amount of people in there. I mean, hikers and all that kind of stuff. So as opposed to Coos County, where it's just very sparsely populated.
Definitely is. It's a very interesting aspect, and there's some tendencies that I have noticed and characteristics about the Bigfoot and their activities that kind of differ between the mountain Sasquatches, so to speak, and the ones that are lower down in the valleys versus up north in the Great North Woods.
Oh, really? What have you noticed? I'm just curious.
So the ones up in the mountains aren't really wood knocking or vocalizing that much. They are
Hmm.
pretty silent, and they're more of watchers, from what I
Interesting.
understand. And the
Huh.
ones that are down in the valley more, they are more prone to interacting with the people. And I have a person that is in the central part of the state, just south of Lake Winnipesaukee,
Yep.
who showed me a very, very clear security cam video, and it shook me. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of it. They didn't give me permission to copy it, but they're very much more prone to coming up to people, apparently,
Hmm.
down southern areas of New Hampshire versus north of the Whites.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it's just because you have the adaptive behavior. You're dealing with people on a more frequent basis. So up there, it's a little more sparse. So I have that kind of theory. I know a lot of people have talked about the virgin Sasquatch, so to speak, the ones that live in more remote areas that are just not really used to interacting with humans as much. Whereas if you have some that maybe live in a state or national forest, that there's always people coming through. Maybe there's a curiosity factor there. Maybe there's more of a tendency to interact. I don't know. I mean, I think there's so much of this phenomena is unknown have questions. We have habituation sites going on, people in properties who have sustained activity, which doesn't really seem to make sense for a creature that wants to stay elusive. But maybe there's a curiosity there. They're trying to get food. Oftentimes, people report their food being stolen, apples, pears, that kind of stuff. So, so many questions. That's what these conversations are great. You realize you don't really know a whole lot in the end of the day. It's all, we have more questions than we have answers, a lot more questions by far.
Truly so. Yeah.
So crazy. But yeah, man, I'm sure we could talk all the rest of the night about this kind of stuff. We'll definitely have to keep in touch and keep spreading the New Hampshire stories.
100%. Love to.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, it's been awesome in the comments. I apologize to everyone who's left awesome comments that I just simply haven't been able to look at. Obviously we're having the conversation, but there's so many great people in the comments with theories, with their own encounters. And if anybody wants to share, I mean, please feel free to contact me. If you want me to forward it to New Hampshire Sasquatch here, I can do that as well. Or just contact him. I've left his Instagram handle down in the description. That's sort of the main site that you're on right now.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be too much out there, so to speak.
Yeah,
I don't want a website. I don't want any of that. It's more of which, when I get your report, it's going to be going to a manila folder, basically.
Yeah, that's
written down, and the rest is history. It'll be used. I won't exploit anybody with their knowledge or their encounters, especially if you want to remain anonymous.
Yeah, totally.
That's a huge thing. I want people to be comfortable with contacting me about their situations, their encounters, if they want them out there. That's my main goal. I want people to be more comfortable with Sasquatch as a whole in this community, especially around here.
Yeah, and I applaud you for that. I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously, what I do is a little different. It's not so much regionally focused, although whenever I get the chance, as you know, to do something New Hampshire related, New England related, absolutely love it. I do my research here. I've had plenty of people I know that have had encounters here, but it's just so fascinating from my perspective, going to all these other places in the country, like to Northern California or Oregon, seeing how culturally acceptable it is, and wondering, could we ever get to that spot here? I don't know, but at the same time, you're kind of getting in at the ground floor because you're getting a lot of these reports, people that are, it's that, as we talked about during the show, that they don't feel comfortable sharing these stories until they really know you or know that you're not trying to exploit the story or just put it out there to make fun of them. So I hope that we can get to that point. And I think little bits and pieces we are. I mean, there's folks like yourself, Carrick is doing his stuff. There's lots of other great people that are out there putting little pieces of the puzzle, but always got definitely a soft spot for the New Hampshire stories. A little bit biased in that regard, but yeah, no, man, really seriously appreciate you coming on and sharing all that stuff.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, totally. Awesome conversations. My mind is just, I was like brain fog when I started. Now it's finally starting to all kind of the wheels are turning again. I can think, and I have a lot of questions now. So awesome. Thank you guys all in the comments. A lot of great people. Kevin Hamilton, thanks for your comments, Kevin. Greg as well. Peggy says, thanks for a great show, though I do not approve of Sasquatch violence towards dogs. Yeah, that's, I mean, as obviously it's not funny. I feel bad for the lady. That's such a frustrating place to be in, especially when you're not taken seriously by the authorities. I mean, what can you really do? So
I just want to add one more thing in there.
Dude, go for it.
For those of you that don't have Instagram, I will be making a Facebook page. It'll be underneath the same name, New Hampshire Sasquatch, and you can also reach me at my email for New Hampshire Sasquatch at gmail.com as well.
So just want the full title with at gmail.com.
Correct, 100%.
I'll throw that in the description down when we log off here. But thank you, Mike. Good to see you after a while, buddy. It says great show. Glory, thank you. Brian, obviously, awesome, man. Brian's such a good dude.
Yeah, he really is. He's a real one, that's for sure. He's a real dude.
Totally.
He's awesome.
It definitely is. I definitely really enjoyed our hike because I've been all over the country this summer, and that was like my one New Hampshire hike that I got to squeeze in, and I got to go with Brian and his awesome dog Chewy. So that was super fun.
Yeah,
We'll
I'm
have
trying to get into the hiking scene again. I want to
oh
do that, so
totally
maybe I can join you guys. I know
oh
Brian's talking
absolutely.
about it.
Well, we'll do some squatching either way. Just hang out in some spots and see what we can or can't have happen if people want to do that. Because I was talking to Brian about that. So
Yeah, you're on the western part of the state, correct?
I'm in southern New Hampshire, so I'm like
Oh,
south
southern.
central. Yep, yeah,
Okay.
yep.
All right. Yeah.
So not New Hampshire's not that big of a state, so it's not too bad. But I do I know my research area is a little bit more towards like the Monadnock area, but not that far. So
Yeah,
awesome.
I wouldn't mind driving out there. I know people in that area. No problem.
Oh, for sure. Bigfoot Okanagan, what's up, Leon? Been a while since I've talked to Leon. He says, keep doing what you're doing, gents. It's important. I appreciate it. And you, man, putting out those critical thinking videos as well. Absolutely love it. Crystal Panic says, I have to go now and listen from the beginning. Excellent show. Thank you. And yeah, thanks to everyone in the comments. You guys are awesome. You're one of the biggest reasons I still do this, aside from getting to talk to awesome people like Evan here. But sometimes you just get so burnt out with the topics and, you know, the as we talked about the Bigfoot politics and all the crap that goes on. And I'm a little Bigfoot burnout in general from working on these films. Just we're constant go go go, but it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't trade it, definitely. So, but yeah, guys, thank you so much for everyone that tuned in. I'm gonna stop saying thank you like every 2 seconds now, but I'm not sure if we're doing a show next week. We'll be on the road again, so stay tuned. We'll definitely be doing some more live streams as we're out and about, but we might have Carrick step in. If not, just stay tuned, guys, because we definitely will have some awesome topics coming up in the fall as well, and in the rest of the summer. So, all right, guys, thanks again, man, for coming on.
No problem. It was awesome being here.
All right, have a good night, everybody. We'll see you guys at some point, either
Have a
on a
good
live
night,
stream
guys.
or something. Bye, guys.